Where we roll. Okay, right. People, firstly, welcome, and it's lovely to see a nice, decent crowd here tonight, as we always are in quality, but now we are in quantity as well. So, firstly, welcome, and it's lovely to see you. Let me spotlight myself for a second, because we're going to share a screen. Right, we're up to a new unit, and you can see my 2027 calendar, as I pointed out last year, is firmly in situ, although having not been written on. All right, Sue, don't need to not shake your head. But okay, what are we
That's
doing?
default.
Pardon?
That's default mode.
No, just feeling chilly.
No, we continue. Um, right, so our new unit is all about reasons for mitzvahs. Reasons for mitzvahs. And it's really important, and we're going to set this up and frame this hopefully very well, because we're going to look firstly at whether reasons for mitzvahs is a good thing, a bad thing, a can you, a can't you, a should you, a shouldn't you. And then we're going to do a deep dive into some reasons suggested and assigned to various different individual mitzvahs. So we're going to look at Shabbos, we're going to look at Tefillin, we're going to look at studying Torah, we're going to look at judging people favorably, amongst, I think, one or two others, to see if we can get a now we know what reasons are, let's kind of see where they go. Within that, we're going to look at overarching reasons for mitzvahs. In other words, just like every individual mitzvah kind of has its taste and flavor, there are also general reasons for mitzvahs. You know, it's a bit like restaurants. Each kind of restaurant has a flavor, but obviously all the foods are different, right? So every individual mitzvah has its own different flavor, taste, thing it's doing, thing it's elevating, things it's effecting in the spiritual world, and we'll see physical as well. But mitzvahs in general have kind of a general motif or a general theme as well. So hopefully we'll try and cover both of them. So let's do a few starter questions. We'll warm up and we'll see if we can look at some of the sources and some of the ideas as well. So let's start from the very beginning. Reasons for mitzvahs, good thing or bad thing? You know, so what are the advantages and what are the pitfalls? I actually think this is partly a generational thing as well, which I'm glad to unpack and explore together as well. And if I told you there's two different types of people, there's one person who wants to know the reasons for all the mitzvahs, right, and then they'll do them, so to speak. And the other person just they'll do them, you know, just like, yalla, you know, don't need to know why, we're just going to do them. Who's in a better position? Who's more advisable?
Yeah.
Or which is more advisable, I should say. What do we feel?
I think we should understand what we can.
The latter. Jonathan Lever said the latter.
Thank you,
These
Jonathan.
auctions. Just got a bid in from China saying the latter, right?
Okay.
Go on.
I think people
I would just say do it.
The former.
The former.
You need
In other words,
yeah.
the reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go on, Werner, you were saying?
Yeah, I'm with you should understand what you're doing.
Understand what I think. Okay. Simon, were you about to say something?
Yes, I would say just do it.
Just
I don't
do
need
it.
to understand. Hashem says so, you just do it.
Just do it. Other brands available, but just do it. Okay.
Yep.
Fine. Okay. So the truth is,
I think that might be along the right lines, because even if we know the reason, we already anyway know it can't be the full reason, and ultimately all of the mitzvahs we have to do because Hashem says, just do it.
But there's two different types of mitzvot. There's ones that we understand, ones we don't understand.
we're going to get to that as well. Excellent. Chukim and Mishpatim. We're going to see what the real difference is. Jonathan Lever's put also on the chat, what about Nasa and Ishma? And Nasa and Ishma, by the way, is even more removed from what we're discussing, because Nasa and Ishma is where the Jewish people, before accepting the Torah, said we will do, and then we will Nasa, we will do, and then we will listen. That wasn't we will do, and then we'll find out the reasons. That was we'll do, and then we'll learn, we'll like kind of find out even the details. Because that was a total commitment to do no matter what, right? So it's just important to kind of categorize and differentiate and understand over here. We're not dealing with people for whom reasons preclude observance. In other words, we're not dealing with people who stand up and say, look, I will not do whatsoever until you tell me the reasons. We're not dealing with that, right? We're dealing with people who are performing is the wrong word, observing, fulfilling anyway. Question is, with an element of reason or not? Let me throw a different kind of a different angle over here. Is it ever within our grasp to assign reasons? In other words,
you can definitely have a go. There's definitely a book, isn't there, about a father to his son where he's assigning at least
Excellent, very good. So the
beginnings of
Sefer
reasons.
HaChinuch, fantastic. Sefer HaChinuch, written around 900 years ago, written in Barcelona-esque area. A father to his 13-year-old bar mitzvah boy son, and it, amongst other things, goes through the various reasons for mitzvahs. Anyone know who wrote the Sefer HaChinuch, by the way?
It wasn't Rabbi HaChinuch, was it?
It wasn't. I'll give you
Was it the Abarbanel?
lots of prizes for anyone who can tell me who wrote it.
Not the Abarbanel then.
No.
The Abarbanel.
No, it wasn't. No, so I feel bad. Not Rav Haigon. No, it was later than that. So I feel bad for doing this. It was written anonymously. We don't know. We don't know. There are various clues. He was a Levi because he says that, and he quotes. We know kind of where and when because of the people he quotes, but it's written anonymous. To this very day, we don't know who it was. Okay, anonymous was your second choice, Jonathan. Great. Okay, good.
Hedging your bets, Jonathan.
There we go. Fantastic. Okay, so the Sefer HaChinuch, you're right, does that, as do various others. The Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, Guide to the Perplexed, also has various reasons for mitzvahs. The question is, are there any pitfalls? I mean, let me give you an example, and we'll do this in a second from the text. Let's say someone were to get up and say, look, one of the reasons for eating kosher is because it's healthier for your body, physically healthier. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is the pitfall or the potential pitfalls, drawbacks, disadvantages of doing something or saying something like that?
Can you prove it?
Yeah. But the vegetarians and the vegans do it.
Where do you get it from? Go on, so what are you saying, Henry?
No, I said the vegetarians and the vegans
Very good.
are convinced that their, in my opinion, sugar diet is healthy.
Excellent. Yes. In other words, the next level of this is saying, hold on a second, if you're going to relegate a reason for a mitzvah down to the physical world, well, what happens if you can achieve that through other means? I mean, then just have non-kosher, do it in diet form, and you're good. It's also good for your body, right? Or what about, for example, someone who, eats kosher food that's not particularly healthy? In other words, have you relegated it to something that's almost self-serving because you've said the benefits, and therefore when you don't want it to be self-serving, when you found another way to, accrue that benefit, you'll drop the mitzvah?
There are certain things that, if I'm not mistaken, can be overruled. I'm thinking something about like leaving water overnight. And like in the olden days, you couldn't eat it because, I don't know, something would go in or whatever. And now you can drink the water even if you've left it uncovered. So there are some things where there's a reason, and the Gemara sort of outlines why you don't need to do it anymore, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Sometimes there are. Mainly those would be rabbinic. And rabbinic, under various terms and conditions, we've got a separate unit about rabbinics. Sometimes they can be done away with. Again, certain terms and conditions apply.
Some things where we may not know the whole reason, but if we learn the root of where it's come from, if we can't exactly do it or there's some kind of exception, we can understand it and make the right decision. I don't know. You can't do this with a jar or a packet on Shabbos because you can't go through the letters. Mm-hmm. If you can open the packet without tearing through the letters, that's fine.
Yeah. So
it's understanding that
100%.
What it is. So it's not a reason for why you can't tear letters. That goes back to something else. Mm-hmm. But if you can understand the root of it, and then when someone goes, but what about this that's similar? You can go, oh, I see the similarity with that, and therefore
100%.
This is what I do.
Yeah. 100%. So I think there's a slight difference. It's quite also well unpacked between understanding the whats and understanding the whys. In other words, if we could say, right, 39 forbidden activities on Shabbos, what are they? So they come from here, etc. Now you're told, okay, and now what about Shabbos in general? What is this notion of Shabbos? That's understanding the whys, right? The other pitfall, by the way, is it true? I don't mean to sound coarse. Who told anyone to relegate kashrus down to a physical level? I mean, aren't all mitzvahs supposed to be spiritual? I mean, yes, we do them in this world. Are they not supposed to be spiritual? Or do we say, yes, they are, but they go through all the world, so to speak, in as much as they're beneficial spiritually, but they must also be beneficial for us on all the other levels?
We can't survive just with spiritual. We have to do the physical to express the spiritual, I think.
Definitely true. That's definitely true. The question is, where do the reasons lie? The reasons
They
can't solely be physical.
They
Isn't part of... Sorry, go ahead, Sue.
Go on, Werner.
They raise the physical to the spiritual.
They definitely do. Yeah, they definitely do. But if they stop only at physical, then we're in trouble. Right. So that's the background. Let me see if I can share. Oh, let's hope this works. 1 second.
Sorry, but this just has to work for positive mitzvahs as well as negative mitzvahs.
Everything. It should work with everything. There is a debate I don't want to get to yet, whether is it only positive mitzvahs that build, in other words, they develop us, and negative means avoiding the poison, so to speak, or no, actually negative or avoiding negative also builds us. There certainly are reasons for the negatives as well. In other words, even if the negatives is just avoid, there's a reason why certain things we should avoid. Right. So yes, in short, a bit of a long answer to your important question. Yes, in short, negatives also have reasons. Okay, mitzvahs, let's go. So Reb Chanan ibn Akasha Omer, those in shul will be tempted to say Kaddish after this, but yeah, we're not going to. So this is the Mishnah customarily before which they say Kaddish in shul. Hashem wanted to give the Jewish people merit, therefore he increased their quantity of Torah and mitzvahs. In other words, Hashem wanted to give us lots of merits, opportunities and reward. Therefore, he gave us many, 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 many mitzvahs. Lovely Mishnah in Makkas. We've added it, so to speak, to Pirkei Avos, which, by the way, is interesting because if you think about it, I know my children, definitely some thereof, if you gave them a choice between 613 tasks and just one, they would pick one. Yet here we're told that Hashem gave us many mitzvahs to give us lots of merit. Now, of course, the downside or the disadvantage to pitfall is that many mitzvahs can also be different kind of reasons to trip up, so to speak, because you haven't done them, right? One would be simpler, we'll put it like that. One would be simpler. Other religions are simpler and revolve around kind of simpler ethics in that regard, right? So what's the 613? So the Rambam says something beautiful here. I actually should have put over here. He says that every single person is wired such that they connect with a different mitzvah. They might be able to do all of them, but there's something, there's a particular mitzvah that resonates with them. And therefore, he says that doing just one mitzvah, but perfectly for the right reasons, etc., that itself is enough to open the gates of the world to come. Of course, the others are there important as well. But as long as you've connected to one of them on a deep level, you already got you've got your ticket. And therefore,
I'm just talking about this. I'm just thinking about other things. For example, Hashem could have made the entire world on day one. Didn't need to take 7 days. He could have given the Exodus from Egypt on one plague. He didn't need 10 plagues. There seems to be something in the way Hashem wants the world to work with this multiplicity.
Yes, there definitely is. We definitely don't have time to get into all of that. But yes, yeah, I see what you're doing. You're doing shrinking numbers. It's just past the financial year. You're shrinking numbers. See what you're doing. Okay, no, it's very interesting.
The other side of it surely is that if you're only keeping one mitzvah, is it not an avera to be ignoring the other 612?
So we're not saying ignoring, but the question is how far you go with that. Your one mitzvah. I mean, nowadays you don't really know which one is your mitzvah, to be honest. Certainly nowadays, but nevertheless, the idea still remains true. Okay, let's look at this Maharal, who's commenting on in his book, the Gur Aryeh. It's actually a commentary on the Torah. He says as follows. I'll do the English. Everything created in the universe was created for Hashem and for His honor. So remember, that echoes what we learned in reference to the purpose of the world. Hashem does not receive honor from His creations apart from when they perform mitzvahs and they serve Him. This is only accomplished through the Jewish people. Only the Jewish people can serve Hashem through His mitzvahs, ... in other words, when they fulfill the Torah. In other words, yes, we're going to talk about reasons for mitzvahs in terms of what they do to us, how they develop us, how they build us. But there's also this kind of cosmic element of mitzvahs, and such that they do something real. They impact the spiritual worlds. And as you said over here, effectively, they fulfill the general goal of creation. So,
but isn't there? I mean, it's called. Is it called Noachide laws or Noachide mitzvahs? Actually, like, do the non-Jews have a way in which they can also honor?
It's a good question. It would require kind of a whole discussion. We did elements of this when we talked about the Jewish people. There's a lot of discussion what the 7 Noachide laws do. The Rambam does say I think we referenced this in the past, that a non-Jew who keeps the 7 El-Chai laws for the right reasons gets a share in the world to come. There are others who discuss whether those mitzvahs are mainly about building society, but in terms of purpose of the world, and again, it's a broader discussion, in as much as the Jewish people were given the Torah, they became the central focus of the purpose of the world. Doesn't mean we brag. It doesn't mean we steamroll, etc. We have to treat all other nations, with dignity and correctly. But in terms of, remember, we did our Jewish people unit in terms of how things developed and how things were centralized towards the Jewish people. We become the crux of that spiritual partnership. Okay, so we've actually done some of these questions to think about. Is it better to know reasons? Are there any mitzvahs that are, interesting question to ask a classroom actually, any mitzvahs that feel more relevant nowadays? Right? And we will do that, right? And the rabbis will get up and say, this mitzvah has never been more relevant. And that's true. There are certain mitzvahs that today feel more relevant than others. Multiple reasons for a mitzvah we'll get to, and we'll get to, as Werner said, chukim and mishpatim. Okay, let's go. So the Torah, this starts over here, the Torah in Yerodea, he's writing a halachic book. He says you shouldn't give reasons for mitzvahs. You shouldn't. Why? Because if that reason doesn't resonate, you're likely to abandon the mitzvah. Which I hear. Let's say the rabbi gets up, says, right, the mitzvah of, sukkah is all about making sure that you are, you feel protected by Hashem. We're all in our big houses and we've got alarm systems and we very rarely feel that Hashem protects us. You go out into your sukkah, flimsy structure, you're protected by Hashem. And in shul that day, there happens to be someone who lives in, like a mud hut, whatever, right? And he has that all year round. He doesn't have his big alarm systems, doesn't have his bricks, doesn't have his double glazed windows. He's living in the great outdoors anyway. And for him, the risk is, he says, this mitzvah sukkah is not for me. Right? There's a risk. I think Jonathan said it quite eloquently when he put it in the group chat before. If the reason doesn't resonate, I abandon the mitzvah. Right? That's the big risk. But nevertheless, what we'll see, and is both with chukim and with mishpatim, and even with chukim, which will define those reasons that are not easy. Mitzvahs that are not easy to give reasons to. Nevertheless, the overwhelming majority of commentaries said, no, you should give reasons for mitzvahs. So let's look at the following. This rarely happens, but what happens if a chazan, a fellow leading the service, decides to do a bit of ad lib? In other words, decides to go solo, a little bit of improv, and adds various words into the davening. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. If he takes away words, we'll finish the service quicker. If he adds words, that's terrible, right? So let's have a look. What happens if the chazan got up, this is a Mishnah and Gemara in Brachos, and said the following words, Al kan sipar, I'll highlight them, Yagiu rachamecha. So he's talking about the mitzvah of what we call shiluach haken, which means sending away the mother bird. And he gets up and he says somewhere in the middle of davening, Hashem, your mercy is on the birds. Right? Says the Gemara, or says the Mishnah, Meshatkin also, we basically tell him to quieten down. It's a nice way of saying this, his career as a chazan may be short, right? Which of course is why you've never heard a chazan say this before. Now, says the Gemara, Al kan sipar yirachamecha, my timer, why are you not allowed to add that beautiful phrase in? After all, Hashem is merciful towards the birds. The mitzvah of sending away the mother bird before taking the little chick surely is because of mercy, right? That's to prevent not to hurt the feelings of the mother bird. So the Gemara says as follows. One opinion says, I'll skip to this, in other words, you're presenting a rationale of Hashem's mitzvahs as merciful, but they're decrees. In other words, who are you to delve into the reason and say, well, send away the mother bird because Hashem is merciful? Who said that's the reason? They're just decrees. They're decrees. No, you've got no right to delve to the reasons, which would sound like from this source, we're not supposed to give reasons for mitzvahs. Of course, the problem is, Gideon, you quoted it before, and there are various other books, Sefer HaChinuch, the Rambam, others, who do give reasons for mitzvahs. So kind of what's going on? Why are we so against the chazan getting up and declaring reasons for mitzvahs? So the Tosas Yom Tov, and this is quite important in terms of context, says, no. You have to understand, the reason why we tell the chazan, be quiet, is because he's saying it in davening. In other words, when we daven, the words that we say have to be 100% accurate. And therefore, if you're ascribing one individual reason to the mitzvah sending away the mother bird, who says you're 100% accurate? Who says? You may be. It might be a good
Yeah,
guess.
that particular example is a bit odd, isn't it? Because isn't that one of the few mitzvahs where the Torah itself does give a reason?
No, it just says that you're going to live a long life. It gives the reward.
Okay, you mean
the
that's a
reward.
consequence or whatever, the reward, not
Yeah,
the
it gives
reason.
the
Okay.
reward. It gives the reward. Yeah, 100%.
What is 100% accurate in davening?
Oh, so we're very hard to give a reason. You're right, because when we talk about accurate, it's got to go through the levels. It's got to talk about spiritually what it does, and also physically the kind of the more, I'd say, the more relatable reasons. So that's why we very rarely, in fact, I don't think we ever do, give a reason in davening itself. It doesn't mean, as we'll see soon, it doesn't mean that reasons can't be there. Reasons do exist, and again, we're encouraged. We'll see a little bit now and next week. But we're encouraged to give reasons for mitzvahs, make them more relatable. It allows us to bond with it, connect with the mitzvahs more, 100%. That's all true. Now, there's one other area of pitfall which is quite important, and it goes as follows. When you have a reason for a mitzvah, you're not allowed to extrapolate details based on that reason. For example, there's a very interesting halacha actually in the Torah which goes as follows. This is quite technical, and then kind of we'll move on to mitzvahs reasons a little bit more, get a bit more free flowing. It goes like this: if you take a loan from a widow, if you lend money to a widow, you're not allowed to take collateral. You're not allowed to take collateral. Right? Why? So the reason seems to be, at least Reb Shimon in the Gemara says, because many widows are poor, and if you're taking away their collateral, then that's it. You leave them without a livelihood, leave them without kind of basic things that basic items that they need. Now, what if the widow is rich? What if the widow is rich? So the reason doesn't apply, but the law still applies. Right? In other words, the danger of ascribing a reason is to then limit the applicability of the mitzvah based on that reason. And so again, the Torah says, don't take collateral from a widow. You then say, well, it must be because they're poor. And therefore, if this one is rich, you can take. That's the danger zone.
But that's your reason. Maybe somebody else might come up with a different reason.
It's true, but even if you knew in theory that was the reason, you still wouldn't be able to limit it. Right? I mean, it's not in the Gemara, it's Rabbi Shimon's reason. I didn't make that up. But yes, I hear what you're saying. Okay, right now that's basically this, and therefore, as long as there's no difference in terms of practical law, go and ascribe reasons as much as possible. That's a very interesting application of this. Actually, the Rambam says, it's actually the Gemara says, there's this concept of an idolatrous city, or the wayward city, Irani Dachas. They get quite a punishment. Not for now, but the city itself doesn't last for long, and of course there are all different conditions as to why and how, but the general law is that idolatrous city, if it's a border town, then it has to be left alone. So border town has to be left alone. Okay, now says the Rambam, the reason is because a border town, if you remove its inhabitants from it, then the enemy are going to come and invade. To which everyone says, well, I don't understand, but you're not allowed to give a reason for a mitzvah. To which everyone responds, of course you're allowed to give reasons as long as you're not limiting the application. And therefore what we'll see primarily next week, when we look at, as Werner referenced before, the difference between a chok and a mishpat. In other words, they're mitzvahs which we call chukim, which sounds like we don't know the reasons for. We have to elaborate as to whether it's we don't know the reasons, or there are no reasons, we'll see, and a mishpat, which seems to be a mitzvah which you can readily, say a reason for. So, for example, classic chok is the para aduma, the red heifer, right? Others as well, but red heifer. Classic mishpat, honoring your parents. What we'll hopefully see next week is that there may not be a major difference between the two. In other words, whilst we tend to say, well, chukim, you can't understand, mishpatim, you can understand, what we're going to see is they're a little bit closer than we think by virtue of the fact that for both of them, we're encouraged to give reasons. So let me quickly just summarize what we've done this evening. Bit of a journey. We started off by talking about kind of outlining positives and negatives of ascribing mitzvahs. We then said, even though the Torah and the Gemara sound like you shouldn't ascribe reasons to mitzvahs, most authorities differ. They say you should. It makes them relatable. Even if you're picking on one level, that's fine. And the mitzvahs will be on many levels, but at least you can identify one, you'll relate to it. And then we also said but the pitfall is particularly acute in davening. In davening, because we're dealing with multiple layers in terms of relating to Hashem, you can't say that's the reason. So please God, next week we'll look at, as we said, chukim and mishpatim, kind of various different. I mean, that's actually not too varied, but opinions. Are there mitzvahs we don't know? Are there mitzvahs we do know? And how that all works. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, very good, Rashkach. Next week we should be on. The week after, I'm in Israel. I've actually got a seed bar mitzvah ship, so you're going to get a deserved week off in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, good to see everyone.
Thanks.
And you.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.